Hello and welcome to the Daily Atheist Morning Show. It is Saturday, January 25th, 2020, and I have a couple of guest hosts this morning. Atheist Pastor, you guys all know him. He has been joining us. Lots of fun. And then Mathpig, you know Mathpig. We will blame him in just a second. And we've got our special guest, Dr. David Kyle Johnson. He's amazing, loves the sci-fi. And he's here with us this morning. Good morning, gentlemen. How y'all doing today?
Morning.
Morning.
Afternoon. I'm going fantastic.
That's
Good
wonderful.
evening, everyone.
Let me first make sure we are broadcasting.
I've got it going in the other one. We are definitely live. For those who missed it, we had the best start to a show the other day, except a certain person forgot to hit the live button. So I had to make the same corny joke twice. People had to pretend to laugh twice. It was terrible.
It was wonderful. And we got it all for free, guys. It was anyway. Good morning, guys. How y'all doing?
Great.
There's a new hashtag that we're going to get going as a result of that I've just thrown in. The chat there. So
Yeah, I like that one.
Mathpig will appreciate it.
Yep, definitely.
All right, yeah, I'm sure he will. Let's see here. I've got that actually ready at hand, of course. Blame Mathpig. And here's Mathpig. Mathpig, he's haven't seen you all week. Of course, we haven't seen Dr. Kyle. We'll get to him. Yeah, he's getting settled. He just got here and we were I'm trying to stall for him, so don't pay attention.
Oh no, I'm good.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
Liste, senor. Perfect.
Perfect.
All right. That's wonderful. So we've got the blame. All right. So here I've got this. Awesome. It's wonderful to have you guys. I'm going to pay more attention to the thing. I'm not going to drop out this time though, because this week, Kyle, I have been.
No chance we're going to do that.
No, this week I've been kind of popping out in the back and just producing and just shutting up. And if I wanted a question asked, I'd have to type it over here and just hope Chris would, I can't do that. You're too much fun, man. I gotta hang. All right. So.
All good. Hey, by the way, I don't know if you can edit it, and it really doesn't matter all that much. On the bottom, there's a scroll that has my name. It says Professor of Psychology, and I am a philosopher. I'm Professor of Philosophy. So.
I knew that. My brain was. I know a guy who can fix that.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Not a huge deal. It's an easy mistake to make. People do that all the time. Philosophy, psychology, they just sound the same, and it's yeah. And
Well, did that for an interview.
The irony is I actually wanted to get it right. So I popped you up on a couple of pages over here and I looked at it and I made note in my head, Doctor of Philosophy. And then a Professor of Philosophy. And then I went over there and so there was that. Before we go too far though, I just want to shout out to all our people. We've got Critical Cripple. He's always here. He's like a stalker.
Yep.
Sneaky like. And then Mathpig, Doorknob Head, all the wonderful people here. Vagrant Sam is here this morning. Hey, Sam. Sam's going to have to come be on the show.
Yeah,
as a guest host. Yes. I think that would be wonderful. I Am Raven is here. That means that Jay can't be far behind.
He just turned up.
Yeah, see, I knew that. You see, and then, so all these wonderful people. Randy was here. So if I missed anybody, we'll catch you here in just a minute. So thank you all for joining us. Good morning, Kyle.
Good morning. Atheist Pastor. What do I call you? Atheist Pastor, or do you have a first name?
I'm Chris.
All right.
So we're both Chris.
Oh, that's easy.
Chris is fine.
That's easy. All right.
Yeah,
it's we've got Super Chris over there and Best Chris over here. So if you want, you can call me Best if you want. But no, look, Chris Pastor or Hey You is fine.
Pastor Chris sounds great.
Chris. Yes,
Pastor Chris sounds great.
I just want to let you know, Kyle, that me and the wife have been through 7, not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, but 7 episodes
of the Orville.
Yes,
nice.
We're really enjoying it. So, I'll let things go. I've been dying to tell you. I didn't want to bother you and text. I was going to be like, can you believe they did this? That's wonderful. I was like,
let's talk about it all on air. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's like, no. Don't stalk the guy. Don't stalk the guys. So I'm really enjoying it. We'll talk about that as you guys go along. So let me do my thing and y'all do your thing. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right, Chris.
Just after all that showing off yesterday or last week with the sci-fi stuff, I went and hooked this out, which is probably the most sci-fi thing that I would have. Hold on, Lacey. I'll pop the camera up.
Okay.
Actually, kind of reminds me. I don't know if any of you all got to see the. Oh, hang on.
Oh, nice.
Look at you.
30 years of Star Wars, and it's massively thick.
Oh, cool.
Huge, big book, and it has. Oh, don't drop it.
Don't break it.
film scenes and stills and stuff.
Oh wow!
Original adverts for when it first came out, and original drawings and stuff like that there from it too.
Nice.
But it's really nice.
My first experience with Star Trek was not unlike that. It was a book, or Star Wars. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Star Wars. It was a book telling the story of the first movie, and that I saw that.
Oh, cool.
Very cool. Loads of stuff in it. All original whenever it came out, and all the episode 1 stuff, and
Nice.
It's really, really good. I never read it. It stays in because it's so delicate. I don't want to rack it, but it has loads of stuff in it for Star Wars.
Here, I'll show you. I'll show you my comparison here. I got this for Christmas one year.
Hold on 1 second.
Oh, look at that.
Like full ATSTs and that kind of stuff, right? Like,
I'll be back in 2 seconds. I'm going to play this game too. I might have something that will get everyone excited.
I'll be back in 5 minutes. My mother just arrived at the door.
Okay. Hey, Kyle?
Yeah.
Mathpig's just stepping away. I was watching what you had there with your book, and Chris is actually going to get something to compare with. Yeah, he's going to get another. He said he was going to play the game too. So I would really because Mathpig his mother showed up. So if you'll show us your book, that had like ads in it and stuff, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I got this for Christmas. But this is what a really good one. It has a full Rancor.
That is awesome.
Let's see here, showed you the Falcon, a full scene like from Tatooine.
Oh yeah, look at
and
that.
it even has like you can go to the side and it has other ones, like you can pop this one open and there's a Han Solo, right? Like
I had no idea they made such a thing.
Yeah,
I've seen pop-up books, but I had no clue.
Like Mathpig, I leave this on the shelf and don't get it out very often because there's lots of delicate things, and then this one's pretty fun. It's Darth Vader with the red eyes, and you can actually see.
Oh, that's cool.
You can actually see the face inside as it forms. So pretty cool.
That is awesome.
I always do have this nice and close, but
oh, nice
scenery. But if this doesn't get you guys excited, nothing will. Hang on, just trying not to ruin that. The original album, the soundtrack, original classic vinyl.
Nice. Is that here? No, it's at home. I have Empire Strikes Back in vinyl like that. It's beautiful.
Yeah, some of the.
Oh wow!
It is. I've had it. Well, I won't say since new because I wasn't quite around at that point. But my mother bought it brand new, and as a kid, I would just play that and Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds ad nauseum.
Nice. I have I've had nothing like the original. I think that's better. Having the original on vinyl is just amazing. I've got Empire, and then I have up here I've got the Superman soundtrack on vinyl up on my on my shelf. So John Williams is amazing.
He is, absolutely. So I guess I wanted to ask, and I don't think we got too much into it last week. You've got a series on the great courses, is that correct?
You have 3 courses for the great courses, that's correct.
So can I get you to sort of, I guess, run through what's on those and I guess, what people can expect from it?
Gladly. So I have I have 3 courses. I'll go in order. The first one is an audio-only course called Exploring Metaphysics. So it will not be on the Great Courses Plus app. I don't think it is yet anyway. They're eventually going to get it on there. But you can buy it as an audiobook. You can buy it as CDs or whatever. And metaphysics is roughly put the study of what is real, of what exists, both inside and outside the world, and like the nature of reality itself. And so the first half of that course is about the nature of ourselves. And so it is about, there's philosophy of mind, questions about the relationship between the mind and brain. Do we have free will? What is the nature of personhood? So questions about what makes you now and your previous self the same person, that kind of stuff is talked about in the first half of that course. And then the second half of the course is about reality, right? So like not the world outside of ourselves. And so I talk a little bit about possible worlds and that kind of stuff. That's kind of like heavy metaphysical stuff. But then it switches to questions about God's existence. And so I have detailed lectures on the three major arguments for God: ontological, teleological, and cosmological. I don't talk about the problem of evil in metaphysics. I do in a later course. And then I shift into what's the nature of reality. And so I have lectures on relativity and what they entail. I have lectures on quantum mechanics and what that entails about the nature of the world. The multiverse comes up in that. The idea that we live in a computer simulation like Mathpig is living in right now is there as well. And so it's those kind of issues that are explored in exploring metaphysics. Then a couple of years later, I did so that's 24 lectures, by the way. Audio only, again, it's on Audible. It's pretty cheap on Amazon. Then I did the big questions of philosophy. And that is 36 lectures, and it is essentially an introduction to philosophy course. The transcript of those lectures I actually use as my intro. I use as my intro textbook. Whenever I teach intro here at King's, I use the transcript of those lectures. And so it is an overview of all philosophy. It starts with an introduction basically into kind of what philosophy is, and then like how to reason well, how to differentiate between instinctive reasoning and careful reasoning, and how to do abduction and that kind of stuff. Then I get into a little bit of epistemology. How do we know? What is knowledge? Is it possible? That kind of stuff. I do talk about sci-fi, here and there throughout that. Like I can't help it, right? So like when we talk about knowledge, we talk about the Matrix and Inception and that kind of stuff. Let me actually bring up. So I've got it in my head here. What the lectures are, because I'm going to forget in what order they go. Okay, here we go. I'm bringing them up actually on my Great Courses Plus app. So we have questions about what is truth and how knowledge is possible and that kind of stuff. And then I have this nice section like lectures 9 through 12 or 13, where like the epistemology stuff gets into like questions like, how can we trust testimony? Can religious experience justify belief? Is faith ever rational? That kind of stuff. And then that transitions into exploring the arguments for God and the problem of evil. So since I did a little bit more detail in metaphysics, I kind of do a little bit less on the arguments for God, but I spend 2 lectures talking about the problem of evil in the big questions of philosophy. One on the evidential or the problem of the problem of moral evil, and then the problem of natural evil. And then I talk about freedom and foreknowledge. And then I get into some of the other stuff I talked about in metaphysics: free will, personal identity, what are minds, that kind of stuff. But then I end that particular course by exploring stuff that I hadn't explored at all in metaphysics: ethics and political philosophy. So there's a big section on what makes that which is good and what makes bad. And so I talk about all the major ethical theories, virtue theory, utilitarianism, Kantianism, that kind of stuff. And then that eventually transitions into lectures about political philosophy. I talk about Rawls and Nozick and Mill and that kind of stuff in regards to what's the best way to form a government. And the way that the course is kind of organized is I have like these bigger questions and then under them subheadings of smaller questions, right? But it's all about like each lecture is the title of each lecture is a question. And as I go through the course, I raise these kind of bigger questions and say, well, here's some smaller questions we need to ask to try to answer that bigger question. Like, does God exist? Or, what's the nature of reality? Or what's good and evil? What way should government be organized or society be organized? That kind of stuff. So that's the big questions course. And then a couple years later, I did sci-fi and philosophy. And sci-fi and philosophy, we talked a little bit about last time. It is motivated by trying to treat media science fiction, not literature science fiction. There's a different course for literature science fiction in the Great Courses. And there's the intro music for sci-fi. If you can hear it.
Sounds very sci-fi and inspiring.
Yeah, it's a kind of a take off the Doctor Who theme. What it does is it treats it treats science fiction as philosophy. So other people who do pop culture and philosophy kind of things treat the pop culture as a springboard by which to talk about the philosophy. So it may raise a philosophical issue or something, like Star Trek transporters raise issues about personal identity, like make you question ideas about what makes a person. Is the person on the other side of the transport the same person as the one who was transport, right? Like those kind of, right? And that's fine. That's interesting. That's good. I do that. I've done that occasionally. That's fine. But what I do in sci-fi as philosophy is actually treat the television and movies that I'm examining as philosophy, as something that's actually making a philosophical argument, that's trying to make a philosophical point or raise a question. And the goal is to go through the kind of major elements of popular science fiction and identify what point they're making or what question they're asking, and then evaluate it. Like, what is the answer to the question? Is the point that they're trying to make right? And in that course, I do Inception, The Matrix, Contact, Arrival, 13th Floor, The Orville, Black Mirror, Metropolis 2001, Starship Troopers, Doctor Who, Transcendence, Gattaca, more Star Trek. I try to do like all the popular stuff that's really trying to make big philosophical arguments.
So that kind of sounds like my playlist.
Yeah, I try, and in fact, I encourage people who as they go through the course to watch the movies. Like at the end of each lecture, I say, so next time we're going to talk about such and such, go watch that movie or go watch this particular episode of that television show. And it can be kind of a journey through science fiction if you treat it that way.
So I guess to expand a little bit on that, and I think it's always easy to use Star Trek because that's something most people are familiar with. Can you give us an example, I guess, of a philosophical question in, say, Star Trek that you would use as an example?
All right, so a political kind of question. Well, okay, actually, let's do one that's making an argument. So a couple good examples. For example, I used the Star Trek Next Generation episode, "The Measure of a Man," which has new relevance now if you've seen the first episode of Picard. But yes. the measure of a man is an episode about whether or not Data is not human, but whether he's sentient, whether he is a person, essentially. And they're trying to treat him as property, right? And there's this trial that ensues, et cetera, et cetera. The argument, of that episode is that Data is a person, right? He's not human. He doesn't have human DNA, but he is a person. And so I basically examine the argument that is presented in that episode to see whether it has any merit and see if there's any analogs to other arguments that people have made in philosophy, which I think there is. Essentially, they're doing something like the Turing test. And so there's a good example. Another really good example is an episode called Rightful Heir. I think it's out of season 5 or 6, where there's this Klingon belief about the return of Kahless. Right?
Yes, the clone episode.
Right, yeah. And so like he returns and Worf's like, wow, it's real. He really believes. And then it turns out that it's just kind of a sham, right? They may have made a clone. But there is this big speech that the clone Kahless gives at the end after he has been granted the kind of ceremonial title of Emperor of Klingon, or the Klingon Empire, where he essentially says, like, Kahless left a legacy, and if it doesn't, what is it? Like, I'm trying to think of the exact line, but it's like Kahless left a legacy that is meaningful to us all and taught us how to be Klingon. What does it matter if he actually ever really returns? Maybe the words are more like if his philosophy is honorable and it is right and it teaches us how to behave. What does it matter if he never really returns? Maybe the words are more important than the man. Yeah. This, it turns out, is a view argued for by a lot of academic theists, right? Who kind of acknowledge what we all acknowledge, right? That the Bible is a myth, that is not actually true. Jesus didn't really rise from the dead. Maybe he didn't even exist, right?
And say that.
Right. But they'll admit that, right? But then they'll say it doesn't matter because that's not the purpose of the story. It's a myth. its truthfulness comes not in its literal truth of historical accuracy, but in the moral lessons it teaches, etc. Right, and so they will still profess to believe, or what I forget the philosopher who coined this term, but alif. Not belief, but alif, where it's something that you don't literally think is true, but kind of pretend it's true or act as if it's true, right? There are academics who, essentially, if you were to square them down, they would have to admit that they're atheists, but they still say that they believe because they treat it in this kind of way, right? Star Trek is essentially that episode could be seen as an argument for that kind of view of religion, right? And so that is something that comes up in the course. That actually comes up in my lecture on Contact. Carl Sagan's movie Contact, and I explore the compatibility between science and religion. And one of the ways to make religion compatible with science is to basically pull all the literal truth out of it and make it only about ethics and meaning. And then it is compatible, but until you do that, it's not. So that's the kind of thing that I do with Star Trek, for example.
So one of the interesting things, a very interesting point you brought up there is religion in science fiction. And obviously in a lot of the earlier stuff, I guess that it was always just there was that undertone of Christianity, especially being America in the 60s. But I guess as things evolved, there's been some fairly interesting religious themes and I guess undertones in a lot of popular science fiction. I guess things like Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica, or the revamped one, and even in Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek 5, where they go and find God, and the classic line, "What does God need with a spaceship?"
Starship, yeah.
So how do you think? I guess looking at the religious themes in science fiction, how do you think that they're handled? I guess from I guess if we use the Star Trek example, let's look at say things like Deep Space Nine and the Bajoran prophets. I guess the reasoning behind that, even though I guess essentially they're wormhole aliens.
Right.
Assuming you're familiar with DS9.
Oh yeah. Great.
I figure we're always safe sticking with Star Trek.
No, I mean, and it's like, how is it handled? I think it's kind of hit or miss, right? Like we talked a little bit about this last time, that there's a couple of classic TOS episodes of Star Trek where Kirk says we've got one God and that's good enough, right? Or Bread and Circuses, where the Jesus seems to be real on this planet that they're visiting, right? And Bread and Circuses, but then you have things like TNG, which usually does a pretty good job of having a humanist aspect, right? But then you have DS9, which a lot of it took place after Gene Roddenberry's death, right? And the religion of the Bajorans is given a lot of respect and legitimacy, maybe more so than you imagine that Gene Roddenberry would have liked to have given it, right? And so you might disagree with that, right? On the flip side, it is the case that, on one hand, their gods do exist, right? Like they are aliens in the wormhole, right? And so their belief isn't completely irrational because they do, right? But they don't believe they're just aliens. They believe they have supernatural powers, et cetera, et cetera. An interesting question about how you would define supernatural is raised there, right? Like if you have interdimensional, timeless beings living in a wormhole, maybe they do count as a supernatural entity. Like, how do you define supernatural? I'm not sure.
I mean, what about someone like a Q? I mean, Q has the power of a god.
Right. Like is Q considered a god? Right. And that's a really good example of I think a difference between the way religion and gods are treated in TNG and DS9. Although of course Q makes appearances in DS9. But that the god entity essentially is a lot more is criticized, right? A lot more in the classic TNG or classic in TNG, right? But then, I think that there's the really interesting things. I don't know Babylon 5 well enough, but Battlestar Galactica does a great job in examining these kind of different religions. You got the polytheism and the monotheism of the Cylons, and the polytheism of the humans, and raising those kinds of questions and asking about whether they're real and that kind of stuff, which is absolutely fascinating. I will say this to make it current, and I don't know if you consider this. I don't know if you consider this sci-fi either. Okay, so there's two things. So Chris thinks I'm going one way, and I'm actually going to go another. But we can go back to Orville in a minute. So
no, I was thinking something else. I was thinking about Babylon 5. Carry on.
Oh, okay. So, but I don't know if you consider this sci-fi or not. But The Good Place. Have you guys watched any of The Good Place?
I haven't seen it.
No.
So it is a story about like the good place is supposed to be heaven, right? And these people end up there, and there's the whole tortured story. I won't do any spoilers, but like they're almost at the end of the entire series. Like the series finale is next week, and in the next to the last episode, they finally make it to the good place. Like they thought they were before, and it turns out they're not, and blah 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 blah. They finally make it to the good place, and it's terrible. Not intentionally, but because this is like a worry, like because it turns out that an eternity of doing like of paradise, of doing whatever you want, just turns you into mush. It's not something that you actually want to experience because it gets boring really, really quickly. And so it is a direct criticism of the Christian idea that, you know, if you're good, you get to go to heaven and it will be awesome and wonderful. And that's your reward. Like it specifically calls out that idea that paradise is even possible. It is. I mean, clearly the people who are making the show are secular humanists, and they are criticizing this idea directly and doing a really good job of it. And again, I don't know if you call that sci-fi or you call it fantasy, but it's really good, and it handles the religious issues really well.
The way I look at it is when you look at religions, I think if you look at the Bible, I'd call that fantasy because it's set in a medieval setting or pre-medieval setting. But then if you look at the Mormons, I'd almost call them sci-fi because they believe in space stations orbiting the planet Kolob, I believe. So you can go both ways with that. And it's interesting with Battlestar Galactica, there are a lot of Mormon themes within the new Battlestar Galactica. Obviously, there's the a lot of the Greek stuff as well, but I believe they visit the planet Kobol, and there's a lot of Mormon theming that's actually thrown into or very subtly thrown into Battlestar Galactica, which is interesting because the creator of the show, I believe, was either raised or is actually a Mormon.
Oh, I never thought like that. You're right. There is a planet Kobol in Battlestar Galactica.
I think he was raised Mormon. The original had more so in it of the Mormons with the 12 tribes and things like that. But the new one, not so much. But if you want, definitely, there's a lot of Mormonism in it.
So it's interesting when you see a lot of those, I guess a lot of those crossovers come in with when it comes to religion and science fiction. It's a shame you haven't seen Babylon 5. I'd certainly encourage you. With the religious and the philosophical theming in Babylon 5. And look, apart from that, it's the greatest sci-fi ever created.
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm sorry, I'm looking the other way. I'm not ignoring you. I'm looking for my Battlestar Galactica book.
It's wonderful. Babylon 5, the religious overtones have a peak. And then, I mean, it's wonderful.
So I think I mentioned this last week, but I just, in fact, since last week, I've been talking to people at the Great Courses about the possibility of doing a sci-fi sequel. And if I do, Babylon 5 is on the list. I will have to watch the entire series and do some research and that kind of stuff. So it'll take some work, but it is definitely on the list. It is something that I have neglected that I shouldn't have neglected.
There's movies to watch. In case I don't bump into you again, you need to discover the order in which and the time in which to watch the movies. There's one movie that drops like right episode 10, between episode 10 and 11 of season 4.
I got you. Okay.
Drops. So if you watch the whole season
you can skip that one. Third space. That's probably the one you skip.
No. They're all good. It's I don't like the ones. I don't know. It's complicated. You'll see.
All right. I will definitely. I'll look it up and make sure that I get the in between movies and stuff between the episodes. I will definitely make sure that I do that.
And then that'd be great to, of course, that'll be a while, but I'd love to obviously get you back on. Chris and me would love to have you to talk about that.
About Babylon 5, yeah.
Yes.
Incidentally, have we got a link for the Great Courses page? Just because, I mean, obviously we're talking about it, and we've got a few people in the chat, so maybe anyone who wants to go and check it out, if we've got a link, we could throw that up, and we can go and check it out. That'd be good, or maybe even we do that sort of towards the end, or a couple of times. I don't know.
Let's see.
We're happy to.
Can you find it, Chris? I can find it real quick, but
if you can do it. Do you have the chat open?
Yeah.
Awesome. If you'll just post anything in the chat, I will make you a wrench, and you'll be able to post links.
All right.
In your description, Chris.
Say that again.
It's in your description, isn't it?
It should. Well, I think some of his stuff is in my description. I just don't know if it's all in it. Let's see. Great Courses. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's. I just linked to my professor's page, and it has all of my courses listed. And it even has like if you can buy some of them as packages and that kind of stuff.
Oh,
if you
I
want
see.
to buy them.
I got it.
But you can also, just put David Kyle Johnson into Amazon, and my Great Courses will pop up there as well. So
there you go.
But for those interested, Battlestar and Galactica and Philosophy by Eberl. Very, very good book. I have a chapter in this one. There is not a Babylon 5 book, unfortunately. It's Babylon 5 came too late into the scene, essentially, for there to be a book on it. That book came out when the series was, the Battlestar Galactica.
Interestingly enough, Babylon 5 actually inspired a lot of the themes within Battlestar Galactica when they did the revamp. I'm sure. One thing that even cracks me up is the use of the word fracking.
I love it.
That came from Babylon 5.
Oh, did it? Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
That's a shout out to B5. But even things like the way that the Starfighter squadrons are sort of laid out and a lot of things along those lines actually does. There's a lot of homage and love that's paid to Babylon 5. I think it's and look, I rave on about it, but frankly, it's the greatest sci-fi.
It's
ever.
wonderful.
And for me, I'm a nerd, so.
Yeah,
and
awesome. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so with first of all, Battlestar Galactica, the new one, is when I met my wife, the only, and this is kind of a shout out to Lucy, the only sci-fi fantasy my wife would watch at all was Harry Potter. Okay, and I tried to get her to watch Stargate, but we started with the Stargate movie and she didn't like it. We talked about that last time. It was really rough. What cracked her shell of being against sci-fi was Battlestar Galactica. The new Battlestar Galactica. We started that one. That one held her all the way through. She loved that. And from there, we watched Farscape. We haven't talked about Farscape. You seen Farscape?
I have not.
You haven't seen Farscape?
Nope. Sorry. Yeah. That's another on the list for the sci-fi sequel.
Okay, that's a good one. So, those two specifically helped me get her into and Battlestar Galactica because of the modern nature of it. It wasn't so sci-fi,
right?
Had we started with Farscape with the little mechanical things and all the puppets, it would have been more difficult. So
yeah. Now what did that remind me of? No, it went away.
But you get the chance though. Babylon 5, like he says, all right, there's these two characters in Babylon 5. There's Londo and Jakar, and in the beginning, pardon me, Londo is very fun and whimsical. And he is the most tragic character. By the end of the story, you will cry for Londo. He's just one of those. He's very tragic. He has a tragic history. And that really, J. Michael Straczynski kind of lays it out. You see how it ends at the beginning. And then Jakar is kind of the same way. When you first see Jakar, his character shifts too. At first, he seems like the bad guy. And eventually his character's dynamic.
Don't spoil too much.
No. I'm just saying that's the kind of story we have. They're wonderful overarching stories. It's not just a bam out sci-fi.
Right. And my thing is, it was probably the first one that was written where they had the entire 5-year arc planned out. So something season one was painful to get through, but something minor that happens in an episode of season 1 will play a part in season 4, and they even had trapdoors for people if they left the series and things like that. Are you familiar with the it was actually done as a mini series, Childhood's End?
Nope, sorry, I don't know that one either. I'm striking out here.
No. Well, no, because when it comes to I can't imagine that any mini series or any science fiction would probably have more pertinence to religion and philosophy than Childhood's End.
Okay.
I'm not going to spoil it. We could have had a discussion. I'll leave that one with you, but chuck that at the top of your list. It's good watching, and there's a lot of philosophical questions that get asked, and especially a lot of religious themes. We'll leave it at that. So that kills the next 10 minutes of questions I had.
I'm very sorry.
Well, maybe I can fill it just a little bit. Whenever you get to the Babylon 5, I hate to keep beating the dead horse of Babylon 5. But when you get there and you watch the first season of Babylon 5, every time Michael O'Hare does a scene without blinking, he'll do a whole scene, say every line without blinking. Or he'll do it and he'll look back and forth between two characters, and instead of turning his head or his body, he'll just turn his eyes. So you think we're going to do this? You think we're going to do this? Check it out. I mean, he's really...
Okay.
He's
a very good military man.
Yeah, I guess you could see it that way. Yeah, it was really painful to get through, but get through that, man. It's totally
also very pertinent as the series goes on. I think, considering
true how he ends up exactly. No, J. Michael Straczynski did that really well. Mathpig,
yes, dude.
Have you seen Babylon 5? I'm sorry, we kind of been.
No? Babylon 5 is not my thing at all.
Yeah. Some people just.
I did give it a chance. I've watched a couple of the movies, and I think it's Third Space that Chris mentioned, the one where they find the gateway actually in the other gateway universe. Is that what?
Yeah.
That's my favorite movie. I would watch that over and over, but I would not watch Babylon 5.
I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. That's where we stopped. I mean, after, because I screwed up and I didn't think to look and see the order. So after the series, we went, let's watch the movies. Oh, damn, this one actually happens here. So
I did watch Babylon 5, and then I watched that series afterwards that Chris mentioned. I just watched it once. What was it called, Chris? The sequel to Babylon?
Crusade.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was
really in Babylon 5, they would be on the deck of the ship, they'd go fire, and you'd see the ship fire. That's it. You'd see the lasers come out. In the series after, what was it called again? Say that again, Chris. Crusade. They had a guy in a special pod, and he was floating around, and when they wanted to fire a direction, he would pow, pow, and it was just the stupidest thing I have ever seen.
And that's why it only lasted 10 episodes.
I mean, it was horrible. So don't bother yourself.
Stargate fan. If you go down the route of Stargate, I talk all day like that. That's my thing. Like.
Well, see,
one of the other themes that you brought up was politics in science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at, themes such as, the utopian version, the Federation of Planets, or even in contrast, the idealistic rebellion setting up in Star Wars, setting up, the new republics and these wonderful versions of democracy where everyone just works together. You mentioned that you had explored some of the political sci-fi themes. Could I get you to expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So one of the main, I explore the political themes in detail in the big questions, and I don't do as much science fiction there. Although it comes up now and again when you talk about that kind of stuff, but I don't do it in detail there. In regards to science fiction, I use to talk about, for example, I use the Orville, and specifically, I have it here, right? I use the episode. If you saw this,
I have.
Right.
We need to talk about that when we get there. I want to.
Okay.
Chris does a wonderful job of interviewing, but we need to set aside some just chat time.
Right. So I use majority rule in the sci-fi course to talk about some pitfalls of pure democracy, and the idea that majority should rule, right? Like majority decisions dictate everything. In the sci-fi course in particular, I use Starship Troopers to talk about fascism. Mm-hmm. And then I use a really fun lecture to specifically talk about political rebellion and the kind of rebellion you're talking about in Star Wars. There's kind of two questions that I explore in that way. I use Star Wars to talk about terrorism and political rebellion in that fashion, essentially motivated by the question of whether the rebels should be considered terrorists or not, because of course the Empire would label them as terrorists, right? But people throw that term around all the time, right? So is it really accurate? What exactly is terrorism? And so I talk about that there, and I can elaborate more on that if you'd like. And then I have a lecture on political rebellion where I use Firefly and an old British science fiction show called Blake 7. Is anybody familiar with Blake 7 at all?
I've heard of it.
Okay. So I actually have a Liberator sitting right here in my office. I'm pointing at it. I have a wooden version of it. And if you watch the sci-fi course, instead of just like listen to it on audiobook, if you like watch it on Great Courses Plus, that Liberator is sitting behind me almost every lecture. Like I have a whole table behind me of sci-fi memorabilia as I do that course. And the Liberator is in most, like you can see it in most lectures. And the idea is that like there's actually this parallel between, are you guys familiar with Firefly too?
Oh yeah.
Right. So there's this really interesting parallel between Firefly and Blake 7, where you essentially have a crew of 7 that are fleeing a totalitarian government, and they're both rebelling, and you have the gunslinger and the engineer and the people who are specialists in different things, and they get in similar adventures. But what's most notably different about the two series is the form that the rebellion takes. Blake in Blake 7 essentially is violent in his rebellion. He wants to destroy Federation outposts and communications and just Federation ships and that kind of stuff. He's essentially kind of waging a kind of one person or one group war against the Federation, and so his rebellion is violent. In Serenity, the rebellion is nonviolent. They are not interested in fighting directly, but they actually, ultimately in the movie, they fight with information. They fight by revealing what the Alliance has done, and they spur a rebellion, and kind of a political rebellion that way. And so that lecture is kind of about like what way of rebelling against fascist powers essentially is best, right? And so that's the kind of way that I explore it there, and I'm happy to talk about any of that more if you'd like. But
I really, Blake 7 was one of those things that came out, or at least I experienced it on, I think it was PBS or something. Mm-hmm. When I was 13 or 14, it was come out late at night, and I'd sit in front of the TV.
It was on after Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's sitting for sometimes I could catch it. I love that show. I'd have to go back and watch it. It's been so long since I've seen it, but I'm glad you brought that up.
The good news is they all exist for free on YouTube. You can find them on YouTube. People have whole playlists. You can just watch the whole series on YouTube for free.
Really? Wow. Okay. I don't know if I'd drag my wife through that.
Yeah, that'd be dangerous. I don't, because it can be hard. There's some good episodes, but it can be difficult at times.
Does your wife join you? Let's have a show of hands. Who here, Mathpig, you don't have to show your hands. Does your girl, female, does she enjoy sci-fi with you or no?
Absolutely hate sci-fi. She likes reality TV, like Love Island and stuff like that, and makes you want to kill yourself. Yeah.
Chris.
Well, I'll put it to you this way: my daughter has a Klingon name.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness! I'm moving to Aussie land, and we're just going to hang out together and do stuff. And Kyle.
We're kind of in between. So some she watches with me, some others she won't. So we always go to see all the Star Wars movies together. So she watched Star Wars with me, and a couple of others, but she's not a big Star Trek fan. So she'll sit down and watch it. But actually, she has a friend that comes over, and we'll watch Star Trek together. And sometimes she'll join us and watching. So like we watch Picard on Thursday. But she'll watch the Orville with me. So
good.
Good. I would never make her watch Blake 7 or old Doctor Who. She used to watch new Doctor Who with me pretty often, and we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. So we probably ought to get back into that. But yeah, so I'm kind of in between.
Yeah. So last night we watched that episode.
This episode?
That episode. That was great. And that was an absolute commentary on our society.
Oh yeah. In more ways than one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm enjoying. There are things about it. I was telling the wife, I was like, I'll wax on about how much I like them. There are things about it that I have a tiny, tiny little. It's not that I mind. It's just that it kind of pulls me out of it. Every now and then they get a little too campy. The pilot guy who lost his leg, that was funny. Lots of that was hilarious. They stabbed him in the leg, and he's like, I just got that leg. That's a brand new leg. That was funny. So I'm learning to get past those things. But on that upvote thing, and he's sitting there humping that. Now, all right. So usually, and I'm, maybe I'm going to throw my wife under the bus for this one, but usually we have a character or an actor that we don't particularly like. Loved Geordie, didn't care for Harry Kim at all. These kind of things. Just even the actor, just something about him I didn't care for. In this particular, in Enterprise, it was the navigator. What was his name?
Oh yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just the way he said his lines. Nothing to do with anything else. It was just the way his eyes, like he would look blankly at something. Anyway, the one that I don't really care for in this one is the black guy. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry.
What's his name?
Yes.
You're talking about Bortus?
No. He's all right.
He plays buddy with the.
He's the buddy. He's one of the navigators. He's not
the one who gets in trouble on this episode.
Yeah, he's humping
right?
the statue.
Yeah. That is not Gordon. You've killed me.
Any other time? While we do that, I thought it was because of that very thing where we forget his name. I think it's awesome that in the first episode they actually had somebody. You know, I'm new here, so I don't know everybody's name. I think that was awesome that they did that. It made a commentary on how it's a new episode and nobody ever knows. That was pretty cool. They even mentioned that on IMDb. But him, I just don't. The way he says his lines is very more flat than I think an actor. I just don't appreciate his acting.
So Lamar is his name, Lieutenant Lamar.
There you go.
And you might change your mind as the series goes.
I'm open to that.
Because certain things happen with Lamar, and it might actually make more sense. I don't have any problems with how he delivers his line, but what you're picking up in how he delivers his lines might play into stuff that happens into season 1, beginning of season 2. You'll see. We'll see what you think.
Gotcha.
But I love Lamar. One of my favorite moments is the boom, bitch, whenever he destroys a particular ship or whatever, right? Like, I love it. He drinks the soda on the bridge and stuff. I love that. So
real quick, I wrote down another question I want to ask because I want to hug you for just a moment, one more time, and I want to ask. I was listening to you describe your great courses about philosophy and knowing things and how to know things and what kind of things you're knowing, epistemology and all that great stuff. That's fascinating. Do you debate for the cause of atheism? I mean, do you debate people?
No, I have not engaged in like a public debate where I've got somebody on the other lectern or whatever, and we have time periods and we go at it or anything like that. I do not engage in that, or I have not. I wouldn't say I do so like out of principle. I just haven't had the opportunity. I've never been invited to do such a thing. I primarily engage in debates. Right. Well, maybe. Right. So I primarily engage in those kind of opportunities in print. So, for example, there's a C.S. Lewis book on C.S. Lewis's apologetics, essentially, and I'm the con on C.S. Lewis and the argument from reason, and so me and Richard and Reppert go back and forth on that, and that continued on out in the journals and that kind of stuff. That's happened a couple of other times with papers I've written where people have written replies and I'll reply and that kind of stuff, and I usually do my back and forth debate there. Right. As in personal debate and that kind of stuff, I haven't done that, whether on podcast or live or anything like that. And I would be very careful about doing so because one of the things I'm very cognizant of is adding legitimacy to views by my mere presence of debating with them. Yeah. Right. Like, so the worry that you have is like the worry you have with, an evolutionary biologist debating Dwayne Gish, right, on evolution, is it puts them, like, it seems to put them on apparent equal playing fields, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And then that, like, in and of itself, you've just lost the debate already before it began because you're kind of suggesting that these two people are equal and that these are just kind of different sides of a coin and that kind of stuff when it's obviously, reversed, right? And so I worry about that.
Absolutely.
So, like, I would even worry about, like, debating William Lane Craig in that way because
it validates him.
Yeah, it validates him. I actually don't think William Lane Craig's a philosopher. I don't. He has a PhD or whatever, right? But he's not doing philosophy. Philosophy is the open exploration of all questions, essentially, with no perceived notions about what the right answer is. You arrive at the right answer through arguments and evidence and evaluating the arguments and stuff like that. And William Lane Craig is just doing apologetics. He's already decided what the right answer is, and he's just cherry picking arguments and trying to tweak them to get them to get to the conclusion that he wants. Right? He is not doing philosophy because he is not open to the possibility that he is wrong. And it's really obvious when you look at his arguments because his arguments are terrible, and he'll never admit that they're terrible. He can't even understand what's wrong with them when you point out what's wrong with them. So
with him though, I think doesn't he hold a degree from like a biblical school or a biblical?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Like he has a PhD, but I'm not sure where the PhD is.
Yeah. I mean, technically, Kent Hovind has a PhD as well,
but he gave it to himself, didn't he?
Did
he create his own school?
The trailer park school.
Yeah. So it's and it frustrates me because I'm actually in the process of, I'm planning on completing a PhD myself, and it frustrates me when you get all these. I understand what you're saying. You don't want to give legitimacy to people who realistically have no right to be involved in the conversation at a certain level. So I can completely appreciate that. So that being said, how has academia in general responded to, I guess, sci-fi and philosophy? What has been the response? You mentioned there's been a few back and forths.
So I mean, there's essentially two schools of thought, and I don't know how much research has been done on this particular topic, but and as you would expect, right? There's two views on the subject. There's pro and there's con, right? There's people who think that the pop culture and philosophy stuff cheapens philosophy. It makes it a kind of a tawdry sideshow. It makes philosophy seem less important because we're talking about popular culture and that kind of stuff, right? And so they want to avoid it. I've definitely dealt with that in undergraduate and graduate school and that kind of stuff. And but then there's others who see it as, there's kind of two arguments for it. One is that it is simple, we philosophers need to do more to bring philosophy to the public. Philosophy doesn't do anybody any good if all philosophers are doing is debating among ourselves, right? If I write, and this would be very common, if I write a highly academic technical paper, there's 5 people in the world who care and 3 of them will read it, right? It has a very limited, and it might make some changes in the field itself and it might advance things forward, but it's not really going to have a big impact, right? Whereas, my sci-fi as philosophy course is going to be viewed and listened to by monumentally more people than would ever read one of my academic papers. Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And so I am reaching the masses in that kind of way, bringing philosophy out to people who wouldn't normally. And then I think that there's value in that itself. Yeah. And
that's why don't you have a YouTube channel?
Well,
sorry,
we discussed last time, right?
No doubt. Just toss it in there and carry on. Yeah.
Right. So no, that's fine. Right. And in a way, kind of my great courses is what I do instead of doing a YouTube channel. Right. I feel like that is my way of bringing philosophy to the masses. And that, and since I've got other people kind of doing the hard work of the production and the publicity and converting it to audiobook and all that kind of stuff to get it, to get it out there. Right. And so I do all the academic content and that kind of stuff. And they even give me helpers for that as well. Right. And I feel like that's kind of, and in a certain kind of way, that's what I do instead of debating. Right. I put the ideas and that kind of stuff out there, and I'll consider in those courses, I consider objections. I talk about William Lane Craig. I talk about arguments that, arguments that, on the other side of the issue or whatever. And then I try to show why those arguments are wrong. That's why I talk about religion and atheism in all 3 of my great courses. That's, one of the things that I want to get out there and want to talk about. And I think people need to hear about. They need to realize that it's not dangerous, right? Atheists are often boogeymen and that kind of stuff, right? And to realize that that's not actually the case. And so I try to be an exemplar of somebody that you'd actually like and to, get along with and have a conversation with, and then realize, oh, he's an atheist, but he's not a monster, right? So that's the kind of approach I take. And yeah, I'm not sure, maybe I kind of went off the rails there, but yeah, so I think that there is good arguments for so one argument is it's useful for getting philosophy out to the public, right? The other half of the argument is that dealing with popular culture isn't as lowbrow, right, as it would seem, because many of the things that we think of as highbrow now were popular, like Shakespeare was popular entertainment at its time, right? Operas were popular entertainment at their time, that's right? A lot of the things that were Dickens, right? Dickens published A Christmas Carol, one issue at a piece of the story at a time. It was popular fiction essentially at the time, and now considered a classic, right? But so many things that we consider to be highbrow classics that are kind of, for academics, and this is what academics study, were popular at the time, right? And so I don't know what's going to hold up, what's current popular culture is going to hold up as a classic in the future. Black Mirror probably, but I don't. So for that reason, I don't think it's wrong at all to be looking at popular culture now and using it in the way that I do. And that's one of the reasons that I am so happy to teach at King's College, is because like my department chair is the founder of the Wiley Blackwell Philosophy and Pop Culture series. So I get to write for the books. Well, I guess I don't get to write because he's my department chair, right? But like because he's just down the hall, I can be highly involved in that. I hear what's going on in the series. If they're short a chapter in a book, I'll say, hey, can you write the chapter on such and such? For example, I'm going to be writing a chapter for The Good Place on whether or not the good place is actually somewhere you'd want to go, right? And
I've mentioned that, and I wrote a book in 2013 where I mentioned that heaven is described as this, and you get up there and these people sitting around a throne, and it literally says they're there for all eternity, just going, "Holy, holy is the Lord." That's their sole purpose,
right? And that's
all eternity.
Yeah, that would be.
I'd be over that after about a minute, I recken.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We'll edit that out.
in the Good Place episode, so there's Chidi. He's a philosopher. He's a moral philosopher, and he gets to heaven. He's like, oh, I get to, like, everybody's going to be here. Who do I get to talk to? Is Socrates here? No, Socrates supported slavery. He's not here. Well, Aristotle? No, same thing. He supported slavery. Well, who is here? And it's Hypatia of Alexandria, I believe. Right. So one of the few, old female philosophers. But she's been there for like 2,500 years, since ancient Greece, right? And so he meets her, and she turns around, and it's Lisa Kudrow is Hypatia, and she's dumb as a brick. Like, she literally is like, "Oh, are you one of those book think persons?" Like, she doesn't even know the word philosopher, because her brain has basically been turned into mush because of 2,500 years of just doing whatever she wants, right? And she's basically just reduced to like all she does is drink milkshakes, and that's her. Like, and yeah, it's such a good episode. It's so good. But I'm really thankful to teach at King's College, because they let me teach courses on this stuff. Like, I teach my sci-fi as philosophy course as a second philosophy course here at King's.
What is King's College for those who don't know?
So King's College, and this is maybe ironic because King's College is a Catholic college. It's in the Holy Cross tradition. It's kind of a sister school of Notre Dame. But it's really what I love about King's College is that it has a heavy emphasis on the liberal arts. It grandly recognizes the value of liberal arts, specifically philosophy. Requires 2 philosophy courses of all of its students, because it is not just, here's the mantra that we hear at King's all the time. It is not just focused on how to teach people how to make a living, but how to live. Right? Like how to give people the kind of mind that's worth making up and that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things I'm very proud to participate in. Right. And so, like, when I teach my classes here at King's, I don't like preach atheism or anything like that. I'm not an atheist pastor. Right. But we talk a lot about religion. I specifically take an approach where when I teach classes, I am just presenting you the arguments. I teach you how to think. I teach you like critical thinking and logic and that kind of stuff, and how to evaluate arguments and that kind of stuff. And then I say, let's talk about some important topics about ethics, politics, religion, etc. Here's the arguments for, here's the arguments against. Write a paper about what you have concluded, not what you think, what you have concluded through argument about these topics, right? I try very hard not to reveal my positions on these matters, especially for my like freshman, sophomore level classes. When we get to the upper division, it's a little bit harder to do, but I still try to not influence them to come to one conclusion or the other. And what's great is, like, at King's, I've had, fathers in the theology department. They're 1 floor below me. That's why I'm pointing down. That have, like, I talk about, what we talk about in my, philosophy classes. And they're like, hey man, as long as you are talking about religion, we are thrilled. Like, we want, like, that's one of the things that we miss is that we, our students in other contexts, that kind of stuff, won't engage with the religious questions. We want them to engage with the religious questions, right? And struggle with these kinds of questions and answers and that kind of stuff. And so, and some of my best friends on campus are, theists in the theology department, where we have wonderful discussions over lunch and that kind of stuff. We get along great, even though we know we disagree about God's existence and certain things like that or whatever. But, like, they know where the arguments stand. They know what's going on. They know exactly where we disagree, and often it's about what it's rational to have or what you should have faith about or whatever. Yeah, it's good stuff. I love being at King's. I'm so fortunate to have a job at King's College, because it is a great college.
So for a lot of us, I guess, especially when it comes to sci-fi, we've all got that one show, movie, episode that I guess was this, that lights the spark. For you, what lit the spark for you with sci-fi? What was your genesis?
Here it comes. I love it when he goes off screen.
Spock, and I talked a little bit about this with Chris last week. But Spock inspired me to be logical as a kid. And even when I was still religious, I wanted to be logical, right? And I would examine the arguments, and that made me the kid in the Sunday school class that always asked the hard questions and that kind of stuff that the Sunday school teacher didn't like and that kind of stuff. But it really was Spock who inspired me to be logical. And I fell in love with logic and philosophy whenever I discovered it, in undergrad. And it really is, it's half a Spock. I have a couple more over here if you want, like a full Spock. They're tiny, but it's actually a piggy bank.
Saving is logical.
There is not in a
federation that has no money.
Yeah,
that's true. Good point.
Yeah. Although you say that you don't have any money, and then like you look at DS9, there's money everywhere, right?
That always confused me.
With DS9, the Federation just seems to, when they encounter a race that uses money, they just make it and get it. Like, you need this money.
Here's some credits. So I always, even whenever I was a kid, would want to be rational, intelligent, follow the arguments and the evidence where it leads, right? And just when I discovered philosophy and actually studying the arguments and that kind of stuff, I realized that, that's where the arguments and evidence leads, right? Like, and I talked about this on Neil's podcast. So you can look up Neil's podcast where I kind of went into detail about my journey away from belief in God. And then there's also a chapter in a book. If you look up David Kyle Johnson on academia.edu and look under book chapters, look at the very bottom, and there's a chapter of mine that's essentially, it's a book all about people's conversions away from theism. And it's got people from all different kinds of religions talking about their way out. And I talk about my way out there. It's just a few pages, but so if you're interested in the details there, but essentially it was just a slow process of philosophy kind of whittling away one belief at a time, from Trinity to, sacrificial atonement to resurrection and that kind of stuff until finally belief in God was gone. But that's essentially what happened. But it was all because I want to be logical, and I want to be logical because Spock inspired me to.
That's wonderful.
Now I would have a question to everyone in the panel here, and also to everyone who's in the chat, because this is, I think, one of the great debate questions of our time.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your captain? So Mathpig, we haven't heard too much from you. That's probably my fault. So who's your captain?
Me, I'm Cisco.
Cisco?
Yeah.
Chris?
That's tough. Cisco / Picard. It depends on the circumstance. I love them both. They're both right up there.
Dr.
If
Charles?
you were to ask me who I wanted to be, okay, never mind. They're right up there. They're both awesome.
We all want to be Kirk. Let's not kid ourselves.
That's what I was telling last
Who doesn't
week.
want to be Kirk?
Right, last week, whenever he was talking about wanting to be Spock, I told the little story about how when I was 5, my mom, who was a Star Trek, the original series fan, made me a little gold Kirk uniform shirt with the gold braids around it. I mean, that was my first influences. And then Picard. When I was teens, I was hitting puberty, all the hormones was going on. I didn't have a girlfriend, so I just sat around watching Star Trek, sort of. I'll tell you.
Like most of us watched too much Star Trek. I didn't have a girlfriend either in school.
Troy, the redhead, Dr. Crusher. My wife, she's a nurse practitioner at the VA. She hates Crusher. Doctor's orders. She hates. Of course, any medical show, House, ER, anything she hates. They're all just ridiculous because
she sees behind the
And so she hated her, that Crusher, because of that. Doctor's orders, and she's always flirting with Picard. Now the doctor from DS9 she hated, and we can exemplify it in this. He would be like, "He's gonna die. I've done nothing, and I'm all out of ideas." That was kind of the way she kind of saw him, because he was like, so with her it's really hard, and I'm hoping she'll like Phlox, because like I said, we're pausing episode or Enterprise to watch Orville now.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hoping she'll like Phlox, but so far he's all right. As long as they don't get too dumb with him. But the actor does a good job of playing them. And now her favorite doctor is the Doctor.
Oh, the Doctor. Yeah, of course.
The Doctor. He's just
interesting with the Doctor, and we'll come back to that in a second because that's probably pertinent to the Measure of a Man you were speaking about before. So Dr. Cole, who's your captain? I
think you make an interesting case about wanting to be Kirk, but maybe just for the ladies, right? Like, because
Sure.
I mean, I've written a chapter about how Kirk is a jerk, right? Like Kirk is not a moral exemplar in multiple ways. There's lots of things wrong with Kirk. So, but I could see that argument just because of, what it would be like to be Kirk, right? But who would I want to be commanded by? Picard. Picard is my captain.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And for me as well, it is 100% Picard.
Absolutely.
So now to really get controversial, because I'm looking in the chat and there's a few things that are happening. Who's your doctor? So Mathpig, who's your doctor?
Oh, I have to go with the Doctor from Voyager. I love the Doctor from Voyager.
So I was going Doctor Who doctors, but
yeah.
Doctor Who.
Which incarnation of the Doctor from Doctor
Who?
Who?
Before we do that, that's great though, because I want to do that. I have a favorite Doctor too. Can we get your favorite Doctor from Star Trek? Because it's on the table. Can we do that?
Let's do it. We're here.
First officers too, because the wife hates it. Almost all the first officers and doctors.
Mine's McCoy.
McCoy. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Riker for the first officer.
Who's that?
Riker for the first officer. McCoy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'd have to go with Spock as a first officer.
Yeah. Okay. McCoy and Spock. Gotcha. Classic blues. Mathpig.
Pardon?
Do you have a favorite Star Trek Doctor?
Yeah, well, the Doctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So me and you on the Doctor. Those two are on McCoy. Totally understand. Now, Tom Baker. When I don't know how old I was, probably 12 or 13. We had a tiny little black and white TV, and we'd turn it on, and you hear that sound from the start and it was Tom Baker, and he was my doctor. If you were to pull my fingernails off and ask me who Doctor Who is, I would point to Tom Baker, and I would go, "That is Doctor Who." Carry on. How about you, gentlemen?
Doctor, my doctor. See, I'm absolutely David Tennant.
Okay.
David Tennant with Billy Piper as the companion, and I could watch that for 50 years. You know what? I wouldn't get bored in heaven with that. I could watch. I'm good.
Gotcha.
Spock is the logical choice. I saw that comment. And for me, I think my favorite Doctor is Matt Smith.
Okay.
I might be too influenced by Amy in that choice because I really like Amy Pond. But
I upvote you.
but I really do like Matt Smith's Doctor. I like how quirky and kind of crazy he is, and I really like the writing there. I really like the grandiose stories that are told and the way that they weave together. And one of my favorite elements about Doctor Who is the time travel. So I like the time travel paradoxes that it produces, and like the idea of River Song and the Doctor being married but going knowing each other in opposite directions, and the Pandorica I loved, and the one of my favorite bits was in that series was when the Doctor kind of blinks out of existence, like and Amy has to remember him to bring him back, and she's at their wedding, and she brings back the TARDIS by realizing that it is something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, all in one thing. Just love that. Yeah, like that. I really like the Matt Smith, and love his ending was awesome. And the 50th anniversary is when Matt Smith is a doctor, and it's all good stuff.
Let me ask let me ask other Doctor Who guys while I got you, because if I were to introduce my wife, as we've discussed throughout this, where do you think I should pick up? We don't want to go all the way back to the first and the 50s. That's just not
Eccleston. Started Eccleston.
Okay, that's where I was thinking, because that's where I kind of picked it up too. But if we go there.
Let me give you a counter narrative. Like it's totally fine to go with Eccleston because that's how everybody else was introduced to it when they rebooted in 2005, and you can definitely pick up the story from Eccleston and go. Here's an alternate thing that you could do. All right, start with Matt Smith. Start with the 11th Doctor, because it does kind of reboot right there, and the story starts over, and you can pick up right there and go without knowing what happened before. You can do that, and follow Matt. So no, yeah, well, okay, no. So Skip Eccleston. I'm not saying all together. This is a different order, but like so Skip Eccleston and Tennant at first. Start with Matt Smith, and Amy Pond, right, and go through that story. And again, you don't need to know anything beforehand to go through there and get to the 50th. Okay, then you will get to the 50th, and you'll have 3 doctors. You'll have Tennant, you'll have the War Doctor, and you'll have Matt Smith. And then essentially, what you're going to do is at the 50th. Follow the War Doctor back because he regenerates into Eccleston. Like at the very end of that, he starts to regenerate. You kind of see that it's going to be, and you follow back, and then you watch Eccleston and Tennant, and it will be very different, right? And you'll realize that he's like forgotten or whatever, but you kind of know the backstory, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you get to Matt Smith again, then you skip over and watch Matt Smith's last episode, which is after the 50th, and then go on with the newest doctors, which would be I'm looking at him right here, Peter Capaldi, and then the newest doctor, which is Jodie Whittaker. I just go from there.
I'm really looking forward to seeing her. That was wonderful when they chose her for that episode.
Yeah, she's good. She's good. She's fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay.
I really wanted to like her. I really, really wanted to because I'm trying to think the show she was in with actually with David Tennant, and she was brilliant in it. And I love her as an actress. And when they announced her, I thought, wonderful, fantastic. This is going to be a new take on it. But I really have struggled with her.
Yeah, with the execution, with her execution.
Yeah. And it's not her as an actress, but I just think it's the stories that they're putting out.
Yeah, okay, so that I could like. So I really like her as the doctor. There's been a couple of stories where I've been kind of like I just don't think the writing is as good. The one of the latest episodes I watched was essentially about global warming, and it was I love stories about that. I want more people to be their attention drawn to that or whatever. I thought it was just a little bit too kind of over the head, which is maybe ironic because I like the Orville because it does hit you over the head. But I think it's for some reason I think it's okay for the Orville to do that, but Doctor Who should be more subtle.
And look, sci-fi has always had that underlying theme of I guess pushing social issues. I mean, Star Trek.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not objecting to it pushing the social issues. It was just doing it too overtly.
A moment where it gets taken too far, or it's doing it for the sake of doing it, rather than actually integrating it into a story with a lesson to be learned.
Sammy Jenkins has got a good point. We're going to need that timeline to watch episodes in. We're going to need that written down somewhere.
Okay.
I actually, as you were doing it, I was thinking when we do sci-fi or watch Doctor Who, I'm going to need to come back and watch this and go, all right, he said, watch this, do this. And just to.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to write this. I'm going to put it in the private chat and you can post it wherever you want to.
You can wait and we'll just post in the comments later if you want, or, they can come watch the video. Yeah. Oh, you're going to do it now?
It's whatever. You keep talking. I can do 2 things at once.
I think Chris is doing it. We'll actually let Mathpig ask a question. Totally catching him off guard. And go, Mathpig. And
what's your favorite Stargate out of all the Stargates, Kyle?
Oh, the Stargate. I don't know Stargate well enough to comment on that. Sorry.
Well, that's my sci-fi whole background all destroyed then.
So sorry.
Well, I have a moment while they're both typing in the comments. I will tell you that I enjoy the SG-1 up to the end of and including the movie that was the end of season 7 in beginning of season 8. If you ask me, that is one of the best sci-fi movies ever. But you have to watch all 7 seasons up to that to understand what the hell's going on.
I can actually take part in that part of the movie. It's like his fronds or his legs. I've learned even some ancient from watching that movie. He's kind of chronic, and I could play a part in that. It's an amazing movie.
It's wonderful, and it goes through. But what they thought is sort of like some of the other shows we've discussed. At one point, that there at the end, they thought the show was going to be canceled. Yeah. So they were going to make a movie. So they produced a movie, and then the show got picked up again. So they turned the movie into the last episode of season 7, the first episode of season 8, and it is phenomenal. It's just wonderful. The bad part is after that season 8, they kind of pull Jack out of SG1 and put him. He just runs the base, and then in season 9 he goes away altogether, and they bring in Jeff Bridges.
Becomes Farscape.
Yeah, and then they bring in the actors who were in Farscape.
Yeah, which the episode where they brought that guy back that plays, not the guy that plays Homer Simpson's voice, the other fella who was an alien that was left here, and they bring him back. He's now become a movie producer, and they go through the little 20-second episodes, and they try and pick an idea of what they want, and they actually do the Farscape idea with them all dressed in the Farscape.
That was fantastic.
So being self-aware like that is absolutely funny.
Wormhole X is that episode. Wormhole X.
I think the nice thing about the last 2 seasons of Stargate as well, even though it wasn't, I guess, as popular, is it does have a bit of it's got a completely underlying dig at Christianity. They don't name it as Christianity because I think they're being very careful in that era, but certainly the Ori are. It's Christianity. Let's not kid ourselves.
The whole point of Stargate Universe is the ship was sent out over 1 million years ago because they actually seen a pattern in the microwave background radiation, and it is a sign of intelligence in the background radiation. This ship was sent out to take small snippets of information across the entire universe to try and see it was like evidence of God.
Huh. Well, I have to say that the Star Trek SG-1, even Atlantis, Stargate, I'm sorry. Those 2 series, they kind of kept the Star Trek kind of feel about we're a team. Occasionally, a team member would get,
Stargate.
Did I say it again? Stargate. They would. No. I'm saying Stargate would take the Star Trek kind of thing. With Star Trek, we're all a team. We work together as a team. Occasionally, one of us will get taken over by an evil entity. It always happens, but we're all a team. Star Trek or Stargate would do that as well. They were all a team. They were 4. They were wonderful. They were a team with other teams. It was great. Atlantis, same thing, sort of. It got a little bit different, but sort of. Stargate Universe, they threw all that out the window. It was human backstabbing human over and over again. It was like, I did not like Universe at all. It was not the Stargate we knew. They weren't a team trying to save each other and trying to get off the ship. They were several teams all trying to screw each other over, backstab each other, kill each other, do whatever they could.
What I really liked about Stargate Universe is it went that direction quicker. Well, before other shows did, it got really deep and it got really emotional and actually drawed you in. I wouldn't say it's better. I wouldn't put it even in the same. Like, it's obviously Stargate Universe, but it's not the same type of show as Atlantis. It's not the same type of show as SG-1. It was a different show on its own. I would put it closer in line with Battlestar Galactica than I would with the other Stargates.
We had 15 years of setting this universe and developing our characters, and this is how our people work. And then they just come in and threw it out the window in a not good way. I can understand the conventions. The opening episode, how much sex did you see in Universe? Or Star Trek Next Generation? And son of a gun. Stargate, SG-1, how much sex did you see in there? Very, very little. None at all, really.
I think the first episode was rated.
Huh? Oh, well, yeah, that's true. She was naked. That's true in the prime, but that wasn't sexual as much as that was slavery. But then
Universe is a different show, and it appealed to a different audience.
It should have been.
And I remember, and this is something, my mother hates science fiction. Well, doesn't hate it, but she won't, just no interest in watching it, any kind of it. But she liked Universe, and she actually made a point of regularly watching it whenever it came out. So maybe it was a show that wasn't necessarily for the sci-fi audience like us, but it was the more mainstream. Yeah,
but it was actually Voyager, was it not?
No.
Well, I mean, because what was the premise of the show? In the first episode of the show, all these people get sent off far, far away, and they're stuck on a ship.
But that's been done before. But every time it definitely wasn't Voyager. Voyagers needed power, and they could have replicators.
And they had 2 different groups of people who were forced to be together and work together, except for this was, like you said, more like Battlestar Galactica, where it was more real and more dungy and more gritty, and they were killing each other and sexing each other and all that. It just wasn't SG-1.
4 series.
I'm going to throw a quick request out there because I've just had an idea to pop to my head, and Dr. Kyle, I'm going to put a request out there. I want to see an academic paper written on the use of the Prime Directive by Captain Janeway.
Oh, by Janeway! Oh, you're killing me. So I actually talk about the Prime Directive quite a bit in the sci-fi course, in my science fiction as philosophy course. So I have a whole lecture on the prime directive there. So check that out. But I don't mention Janeway very much because I'm not a huge Voyager fan. And so I primarily focus on like Kirk and Picard and their use of it. So that would require a little bit more research on my part, but maybe I'll do that.
Universe is that they left Universe. They had some of the series 3 already written. They then went off after it was cancelled, wrote a graphic novel called Dark Matter, and then the same channel had cancelled and went, that looks really good. Can we get you back to do a show on it? And the first series was based on what they had already written for the third series of Stargate Universe. It just...
That's good to know. I've never seen Dark Matter, but I've seen that it's there. So if
Dark Matter starts off with them waking up in cryogenics in a ship that's been floating through space, nearly the exact way that Universe 2 or Stargate Universe ended at series.
Stargate Universe.
It's not Stargate Universe, but they did have 10 sort of stories written for, or partially ideas out there for the third series, and then they got cancelled.
So they only did two seasons, right?
Yeah,
because it sucked. Because it created a negative pressure environment. This is good sci-fi over here, and this is
numbers on TV. But at that stage, streaming was starting to pick up, and it was being watched more back than it was being watched live. And
yeah, well, it would have been. I actually. So now let's. I don't mean to rob all of Dr. Kyle's time. let's just set aside the fact that it's Stargate. Let's just take that aside for now. Let's just assess the show for the show. It was a great show. I thought it had some wonderful graphics. It was more real. It was like Babylon 5 or Battlestar Galactica of the thing, but it kind of, a lot of people didn't like the new Star Trek because it infringed upon their old Star Trek.
Yeah, I would feel like that. Yeah, as we discussed last week, the fact that the Klingons don't look like Klingons, but they completely changed it though.
Right, but that's the same reason why I don't like Universe. They messed with this is how my people are supposed to work. I think the people who make Stargate SG-1 actually got commendations from the U.S. Air Force for their portrayal of Air Force officers in Stargate 1 or SG-1. And yet in Universe, it opens with them sleeping with each other behind each other's back. And the leader of the military is going to take over the ship from the civilian officers, and he's going to kill them to do it. That's not my Stargate. That's something completely different. That's soap opera with Stargate.
They maybe changed the way they would portray the show, but I feel with Discovery they completely changed the universe.
Well, in Star Trek,
no, not Discovery? At all. I think it complemented. I think they added a few things, but I think they also, especially in season 2, went a long way to, I think, explaining. Without spoiling, there's one of the things, I guess, for me as a more modern fan of Star Trek, when they go to, in the original, when they go to, like the Nazi planet or the Roman planet, it was a little bit camp and silly. But there was actually an episode in season 2 that addressed that, I guess, that happening in the Star Trek universe. And it actually addressed it well. And it almost helps the modern viewer be able to go back and watch a lot of that with a new perspective. But no, look, I think we've got a problem where, and it's something that a lot of, especially our sci-fi people have, and people who are into particular forms of pop culture, where when we hear something's coming out, we have an idea in our head of exactly how we want it, and we want to bring our childhood back, and we want to have our characters do what they do, and when we're going back to that original series, we want to have that sort of camp 60s look. But the reality is, that's not modern TV. And you can't have that in modern TV. It would get very, very boring very, very quick.
Yeah, with the new Star Trek, I've accepted it changes. Starting in 2009, I understood that they did the timeline thing. I've watched enough sci-fi that I understand timelines, and that we're not watching the same timeline that I fell in love with Picard. I've accepted that. It's not the same. It's the same universe.
No, Picard's in the same universe.
Here's the thing, though. I don't know how far you are in Enterprise, Chris, but they go back to Chris. Chris.
I've seen all of Enterprise. It's been a long time.
So you know that you get some classic Trek, right? Like out of it, and I think it's exciting, right? Like it's really cool. Now maybe a whole series couldn't be based on it.
But they do explain the Klingons, right? They explain the Klingon change.
Well, they explain the Klingon change, and they also are able to. they did a television show that looked advanced for its time, but also wasn't as advanced as what the Enterprise was in the 60s. They were able to pull that off. And Discovery just doesn't kind of even attempt to do that at all. It's just obviously way, way more advanced than the classic Enterprise was. And maybe they'll eventually explain it in the long term, and they'll kind of explain it away. And the same thing.
How far into Discovery are you?
See, that's what I thought he said, that in Discovery, they also answer again and make it all come together as to why he doesn't want to spoil it for us.
Yeah, well, it's not. I mean, you get Captain Pike saying certain things like, "Oh, we're going to do away with all that holograph stuff. We're not going to have that on our Enterprise because certain things go wrong with it or whatever," right? Yeah. But it's really hard to square what Discovery looks like and then, what classic TOS, Star Trek looks like. That there's just because it's not just Captain Pike's Enterprise; it's all of the Constitution class starships, and all the other ones all look like that, and it's really hard to square that. And I mean, maybe they just should have said it in a different time. Like, if you can't pull that off, you're going to upset people by disrupting the time. I just set your series in a different time. But I don't know. I mean,
so I just take the view of I accept that as much as there's the aesthetic difference, one was done in the 60s, one's done 50 years later. And, I think you've almost got to go in with that viewpoint. Otherwise, you will stress. And even I wasn't too sure how, because I guess my Star Trek growing up was The Next Generation, and that's sort of, I wasn't too sure how I'd react with Picard, but I almost cried. It was so good. I loved it. I
haven't seen it yet. I want to.
No, you got to watch it soon. You need to watch it.
We're going to get to the Orville, and then we got to finish watching Enterprise and Discovery, and then we watch Picard. That's kind of how we're.
What I'll do is before you start watching Picard, I'll send you a playlist of episodes to watch prior, just to catch.
Okay. And we just watched the entire Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. Me and the wife have been going through the entirety of Star Trek, so we should be good. Guys, it's probably time we should wrap up. I hate to end it, but I wanted to ask, or at least throw the open invitation, Dr. Kyle, you are willing to come back and visit with us anytime in your progression of watch. If you want to watch Babylon 5 and come back part way through and talk about things as you go through it, we would love that. If you want to come back in a couple of weeks and talk about Orville again, because I'm going to keep watching it,
Yeah,
it's just the case.
So what we should do is when you're done watching the Orville, you should make sure, let me know, and we can come back, when you're caught up all the way to season 2, let me know, and I'll come back and we'll talk about that. And then also, we could I don't know, maybe we should save it for this. I've got a book on the Orville that I'm working on. And it's not complete yet. It'll be a while before it's in print, right? But maybe when it's in print, I could come back and talk about the book, and we can talk about the whole series and that kind of stuff, right?
We would be willing to do that. Now, we're going to try, but thanks to you in part, I'm going to try to keep the Sci-Fi Saturday theme, and every Saturday, instead of really hitting religion pretty hard, we're going to discuss mostly science fiction and have more of a loose, fun kind of.
I'm not going to give you a choice on that. We need a Sci-Fi Saturday.
Yeah, so we're having Sci-Fi Saturday. Yeah, so anytime you're welcome to come host if you want to be a host, or you're welcome to come be a guest anytime you want to be a guest. So just
thank you very much. I will let you know.
Yeah, because that's a lot of fun.
Especially we'll definitely have to come back and talk about Picard too.
Yes.
And now that you've shown me the thing, I remember last week you showed me your.
Yeah, that was off camera, right? But this is very few of these exist in the real world. But
yeah, now which one is that? Explain that one for me.
That's the Orville blaster. That's the blaster. That's the blaster from the Orville. All right.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end her here. I appreciate everybody. Yeah, no spoilers. Somebody said no spoilers.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
First?
Nice. Oh, Han. Well,
Han show first.
Specifically, that's actually wrong. Han just shoots. To say that Han shoots first means that Han shoots and then Greedo shoots. No, Han was the only one that shot.
Straight murder. It was murder.
It was murder.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I appreciate you. Thank you all for showing up. Thank everybody in the chat. Dr. Kyle, thank you for showing up and being with us.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Chris, thank you again for being the ultimate interviewer, visitor kind of person and making everything so wonderful. And
I've got nothing better to do at midnight on a Saturday, so
Right. And Mathpig, thank you, buddy.
No bother, man.
We let you have a few words. It's just we talk.
No, that's fine. It's Doctor Who. I'm not a massive fan of, as of Babylon 5. When we went down the Stargate route, I get my bit, but yeah.
Okay, well, next Saturday, Sci-Fi
I
Saturday.
can't do the next two. My woman's been torturing me because I keep up in the living room, so I need to give it a wee week. I'll not be here next week. We'll see if she's in a good mood the week after. I might pop back.
Gotcha. All right, everybody, thank you. I appreciate you. We'll talk to you later. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe.
All right.
Catch you all later.
See ya.
Bye bye.